Cue the music. That's what I heard. Well, welcome everyone. It's good to have you at the Myrna Lois here in Helena. I'm Bruce Whittenberg. I'm the director of the Montana Historical Society, and I've had the privilege now 8 times in a row to MC this event, and I'm really happy about that. These are the 2019 Biennial Historic Preservation Awards, and among other things we're going to do today. Every 2 years, the Society State Historic Preservation Office and the Governor's Office honors the persons and/or projects that have contributed to the preservation of Montana's historic resources in a significant way. As most people know, the National Register of Historic Places is the official list of the nation's cultural resources worthy of preservation. This afternoon, certificates of registration will be given to the owners of properties that have been listed in the National Register of Historic Places within the past 2 years. We'll also recognize outgoing members of the State Preservation Review Board who approved the nominations to the National Register in addition to other duties that they handle. And finally, we'll present 5 preservation awards to honor special people or groups who have inspired us with their dedication and hard work to historic preservation. And I'd like to thank John Boughton for preparing this script. You can't see it, but I can't make a move without following this script. And I think the Lieutenant Governor's in the same situation here. So I hope I don't screw it up. This is the right crowd for this event, for sure. You're all the historic preservation people in the state of Montana, and we're just happy to have everybody here. So allow me to begin by making some introductions and have just a little bit of fun with this crowd. When I call out your name or category, just stand up and remain standing, if you would, please. First, I want to recognize any members of the Montana Historical Society Board of Trustees who are here. I think we do have some trustees. Thank you very much. Next, we have the privilege of having some present and past members of the State Historic Preservation Review Board with us. Will you please stand up? Historic Preservation Review Board. We have a few of Montana's local historic preservation officers in attendance. Would you please stand up? I saw Pam Attardo earlier. Hi, Pam. As well as staff and board members of the, there's a shadow on this page, that's weird. Our statewide partners, the Montana Preservation Alliance and the Montana History Foundation, our good friends. Okay, thank you very much. The SHPO staff. We all love the SHPO staff, they're here. All right. Do we have any legislators here? We know they're in town. We had a couple that contacted us and expressed regrets. They're very interested in what's going on here today in some of these projects, but are unable to attend for obvious reason. Owners of historic properties listed in the National Register. Do we have any of you folks here? Look at that, all right. Jackpot. All right. Well, with that, let's just take a look around. These are historic preservation people. Thank you all for being here. I would like to introduce the staff of the State Historic Preservation Office at the Montana Historical Society. We're so proud of the work that they do all over the state, and they really do represent the heart and soul of historic preservation in Montana. So let me start with the State Historic Preservation Officer, Mark Baumler. Right here. National Register Coordinator John Boughton. Other historic preservation specialists in the office, Kate Hampton, Jessica Bush, Damon Murdo, Pete Brown, Jenny Cohen, and Michelle Fair. And they're all here somewhere. Oh, and Craig Marock. Sorry, Craig. All right, and finally, we're very honored, and it's my great pleasure to introduce to you a great friend of historic preservation, and a friend of the Montana Historical Society, Lieutenant Governor Mike Cooney, to the 2019 Preservation Awards ceremony. Born and raised in Montana, Mike graduated from Butte High School and earned his bachelor's degree from the University of Montana. Prior to his appointment as Lieutenant Governor, Mike served in both houses of the Montana legislative branch and 3 terms as Secretary of State. Mike was first elected in 1976. My God, how old are you?
90.
I was just a child back then.
Me too.
Yeah. He was elected in 1976 to the Montana House of Representatives and served through 1980, then served 3 terms as Secretary of State, 1989 through 2000. Mike was the state senator from 2003 to 2010 and was elected as Senate President in 2007. From 2001 to 2006, Mike served as director of Montana Healthy Mothers, Healthy Babies. And prior to his appointment to the office of Lieutenant Governor, he served as Deputy Commissioner of the Montana Department of Labor and Industry, and in addition served as Director of the Montana Historical Society, preceding me in that role. As Lieutenant Governor, Mike chairs the Montana Governor's Drought and Water Supply Advisory Committee, a clearinghouse for sharing water supply and moisture conditions among state and local agency officials, with responsibility to manage natural resources, support constituents, and most likely affected by drought. He also chairs the Labor Management Advisory Council, which provides a structure for the organized discussion of workers' compensation, public policy. I've only got about 5 more minutes to go here. So anyway, a great friend of historic preservation and a great friend of the Montana Historical Society, Lieutenant Governor Mike Cooney. I had no idea.
Well, thank you very much, Bruce, and I appreciate that very lengthy and out of control introduction. I know what everybody out there is thinking. They're thinking, that guy just can't keep a steady job. That's what they're... You know, the 2019 Governor's Awards for Outstanding Historic Preservation, Whoops, I got the wrong script. I was going to jump. That would have really screwed everything up. Here, let me hand this back to you. All righty. Thank you. So it is great to be here and to be sharing this event this afternoon with all of you. And today's biennial ceremony recognizes those who work to preserve the places that tell the story of Montana. The historic places you've chosen to preserve are many and diverse. They are signifiers of a historic narrative chronicling Montana's boom and bust periods, its workaday pragmatism, and its escape to the outdoors, the settings inhabited by pre-contact hunter-gatherers, and the places of industrial production. Some properties represent the African-American experience in Montana, others the skills of a long-deceased stonemason. They continue the tradition of wooden boats plying the waters of Glacier National Park and have witnessed the multi-generational contributions of a farm to Montana's economy, culture. Some National Register properties may conjure up widely known associations just by the names by the National Register nomination process. Often, although the National Registration process uncovers less evident layers of history. And this is coming off. Tighten that up, maybe. You're going to try? And that's moving all over, too. But that's okay. That's probably... No, it's fine. Can you hear me okay? Yeah, I think that's fine. Thank you. For instance, Fort Assiniboine in Hill County. It's known for its architecture and military associations, but has a lesser-known archaeological component that can tell us something about the daily lives of those stationed at the fort in 1879. Another layer of Fort Assiniboine, far removed from the frontier military, is the Northern Agricultural Research Center, which occupies the area today. Its historic contribution to agriculture technology may be less evident to a visitor taking the fort tour, but its contributions direct to the point of reaching our dinner tables. Similarly, Lewis and Clark County's Western Clay Manufacturing Company, already listed on the National Register for its industrial aspects, is also recognized here today as a nationally significant incubator in the mid-20th century American ceramic movement. It's where Montana-born Rudy Audio and Peter Volkus shared influences with ceramic artists from around the world. Some of you may know the Western Clay Manufacturing Company better as the Archie Bray Foundation. Then there are those unassuming places, less perhaps conspicuous in their historic role, but elemental in life as we know it in Montana. The Bureau of Reclamation Huntley Project Office is one of those places. Its humble exterior is the administrative center of an early federal irrigation project in Montana that tapped into the Yellowstone River and transformed sagebrush plains to farmland and livelihoods. The Huntley Project attracted settlers, enabled new farm communities to form, and helped economic development in the Billings region to thrive. Similarly, a collection of modernist buildings at the Helena Airport may, on the surface, only house the Montana Aeronautics Commission administrative functions, but it plays a role that affects every airport pilot and search and rescue effort in the state. Ponder the difference between a Montana without air travel versus one with it. At first glance, the Crump Howard House appears to be just another historic property within a larger historic neighborhood in Helena. But its original owners have a story so different from their neighbors. Clarissa Crump was a slave in Missouri who became emancipated from the owners she traveled to Montana with in 1865. Her husband James fought for the Union in the Civil War as part of the independent Colored Kansas Battery. His currency was toil, and as a freighter, miner, and janitor at different times in Montana. He was a leader in the black community and the only black man invited to participate in an official capacity at the state capitol dedication, a distinction that reflects well upon James Crump of Montana in 1902. Those we honor today see the past as a counterpoint to the present, a chance for discoveries both entertaining and edifying. But it's also work, and for some, researching, advocating for a threatened place, and committing to the act of preservation. That is what is the life's work. And so we gather to recognize these good people and this good work, and for all of us to say thank you. Thank you very much.
Lost my place here. Let's see. During and after the applause following Lieutenant Governor's speech, Bruce will move. Oh, geez, I wasn't supposed to read that part. Sorry. Thank you, Lieutenant Governor Cooney. Think about the stories you just heard about. You know, we're here to celebrate projects and buildings and things like that, but behind every one of them, there's a really great story about Montana and how we've grown as a state and as a territory. Thanks for sharing that, Mike. I appreciate it. Well, let's get on with the show, and I'll invite your State Historic Preservation Officer, Mark Baumler, to take it from here. Mark? No need to applause.
Well, thank you, Bruce. And thank you, Mike, for those words of encouragement for historic preservation. I think it's very important that our leaders recognize the importance of the work that you do. This afternoon, I have the honor and the pleasure, with the Lieutenant Governor's help and the assistance of the staff of the Historic Preservation Office, to present certificates of registration to the owners of historic Montana properties that have been listed in the National Register of Historic Places within the last 2 years. The National Register is a nationwide list of properties that have been deemed historically important to a community, a region, a state, or the country. Above anything else, National Register listing recognizes and honors those properties as being significant in our collective history and worthy of our best preservation efforts. National Register listing can also be a building block to other opportunities, including heritage tourism, educational programs, special grant funding, when funding is made available, commercial tax credits for rehabilitation, and other Main Street economic investments. As owners of newly listed properties, I draw your attention especially to one such benefit in Montana, the Montana National Register Interpretive Sign Program. Thanks to the assistance from a small portion of our bed tax, all owners of listed properties are eligible to apply for an official interpretive sign by contacting the Montana Historical Society. And we have examples of the signs here tonight, and we have application forms out on the table out front. So please take a look at those. This afternoon, we have 32 newly listed properties to recognize. Taken together, they represent over 168 different buildings, structures, sites, or objects that are listed either individually or as contributing resources to a larger district. The properties listed are from 18 different counties in Montana. I'm happy to report that the SHPO was able to underwrite the preparation of 2 nominations, the Dorsey Grocery and the Residence, and the Crump Howard House, 2 African-American associated properties in Helena that were listed under a larger multiple property document that we sponsored at the Montana Historical Society. But we do not and cannot do this National Register work alone. Many of you here are the owners or the authors of otherwise support the listing of these properties in the National Register of Historic Places. Some of the agencies and organizations responsible for the listing of properties that are here today include our friends at Montana State Parks, the Department of Transportation, the Bureau of Land Management, the Bureau of Reclamation, Forest Service, Montana State University, and the Montana Preservation Alliance, in addition to other local preservation organizations, private citizens, and homeowners. I know that each of you in the audience in some way or another has helped in this recognition of Montana's significant historic places. And for that, I thank you all very, very much. On a personal note, I've always said that this is one of my favorite activities as a state historic preservation officer. I thoroughly believe that the National Register represents the foundation of historic preservation in Montana. It tells us what we should be focusing on and what it means and how we should direct our efforts. So this event has always been special to me, and it's quite likely that this may be my very last biennial preservation awards ceremony, and I did want to at least say how much I have enjoyed it and will continue to enjoy the work that everyone here does. Thank you. I'll now be asking our newest National Register property owners, or those accepting the certificates in their stead, to come to the stage when I identify your property and call out your name. While I talk a little bit about your property, Lieutenant Governor Cooney will present you with your certificate, and then our photographer will take 2 pictures. These photographs are by Tom Ferris, award-winning photographer for the Montana Historical Society. So be sure to look at the camera and try not to blink twice. All of the photos will get posted on our website and be available for you to download within a matter of weeks. So, as always, applause for our National Register owner properties is welcomed. Okay, Lieutenant Governor, are you ready to take up your position? And John? And if you follow along mostly in your program, we'll make a few deviations, but we'll start with Broadwater County. From Broadwater County, we have the Stone Hill Springs Prehistoric District. Here to accept the certificate are owners Bob and Brenda Hazeman and Patrick Rennie of the Department of Natural Resources and Conservation. Numerous archaeological sites scattered over 2,000 acres form the Stone Hill Springs Prehistoric District, a cohesive unit that together illustrates subsistence activities of pre-contact Native people in the Broadwater Valley. From the Bison Cliff Jump, an extensive processing site, to the more than 50 teepee rings, the district affords an opportunity to better understand the lifeway of the first Montanans. In addition to the extensive research and writing done by owner Bob Hazeman, Patrick Rennie of the DNRC spent many hours in the field with Bob, assisting in the recordation of the property. From Carter County, we have the Medicine Rock State Park. Accepting the certificate are Beth Shoemate, Montana State Parks Administrator, and Ken Soderberg, Interpretive Services Program Manager. Since pre-contact times, the sandstone formations of Medicine Rock State Park have served as a palette upon which visitors and nearby residents have carved messages. Today, these petroglyphs, along with other evidence of early occupation, represent centuries of human engagement with the places outside of Ekalaka known as the Medicine Rocks. In Fergus County, we have two properties. The first is the Draft Horse Barn Fairgrounds, and here to accept the certificate are Ed Butcher and former Historic Preservation Officer for Lewistown, Dwayne Ferdinand. The Draft Horse Barn reflects the Fergus County or Central Montana Fair's historical importance to the community. Built in 1917 for use as a year-round auction yard and a fair time exhibition hall, the barn served in this capacity through 2009. A local preservation group has since restored the barn, which reopened for public use in 2013. Dwayne, also from Lewistown, we have the Gamble Robinson Company Warehouse. Dwayne will accept the certificate for this property. The Gamble Robinson Company Warehouse was significant for its association with the development of Lewistown as a rail-based jobbing center for Montana's vast inland empire during the early 20th century. Located where the railroad right-of-way intersected with Main Street, the produce and grocery warehouse was built in 1922, even as drought and failing agricultural prices undercut the economy. The property, although successfully listed in 2017 with the help of Dwayne Ferdinand, unfortunately was unable to survive demolition a year later. Sticking to Fergus County, we have the Lewistown Satellite Airfield boundary increase, accepting the certificate as Zane Fulbright on furlough from the Bureau of Land Management. Used for B-17 air-to-ground gunnery training during 1943, the Lewistown Pattern Gunnery Range served as a vital role in preparing the pilots for combat missions during World War II. 50 caliber shell casings still dot the 12 square mile practice area, whose remote location and sparse population made it an ideal training ground for the heavy bombardment aircraft. And Zane has promised us that this will be the last amendment to the Lewistown Satellite World War II airfield. We love that place. From Gallatin County, we have the Federal Building and U.S. Post Office. I don't think anyone from GSA was able to attend, but I'd like to go ahead and read the certificate. The construction of the Federal Building and the U.S. Post Office in Bozeman was important in providing modern space to accommodate federal government offices in the post-World War II era. The building marked Bozeman's emerging status as a regional center which supported the underlying economics and developmental growth of the city. It is notable also as a fine example of modern architecture in the new formalism style. Our not so furloughed Lieutenant Governor will accept that certificate. The next three certificates will be picked up by a group from Flathead and Glacier County, Scott and Barbara Birch, owners of the Glacier Park Boat Company, and James Hackathorn, historian and human resource manager for several boats that ply the waters of Glacier Park. In the first half of the 20th century, master Montana boat builder J.W. Swanson constructed Carvel plank boats using traditional boat working techniques and materials. These boats became a vital part of the tourism infrastructure of Glacier National Park. Today, we are pleased to recognize the DeSmet, the Little Chief, also known as Sinapa, and Morning Eagle, three more historic boats that still ply the waters of Glacier National Park and help tell the story of the important boating concession role in the development of recreation within the park. Thank you for... Next, from Granite County, we have the Moose Lake Camp Historic District. Accepting the certificate on behalf of the owners will be Joan Brownell, who co-authored the nomination. Nine buildings, including cabins, a barn, and a combination ice house and woodshed, sit on this recreational cabin site in the scenic Pintler Mountains of southwest Montana. First occupied under a Forest Service special use permit issued in 1928, the district represents the evolution of one of the oldest recreational cabin groups in the Beaverhead Deer Lodge National Forest. From Hill County, making it all the way down, next is Fort Assiniboine, boundary increase and additional documentation. And here to accept the certificate is Darren Boss of the MSU Northern Agricultural Research Center. Established in 1879 to secure the international border with Canada, Fort Assiniboine was first listed in the National Register in 1989. This boundary increase adds 182 acres and expands the contributing resources from 19 to 29 to include buildings constructed after 1915 as the Northern Agricultural Research Center that is administered by Montana State University. It also recognizes the fort's national strategic importance as a military installation and gives it a revised level of national significance. From Jefferson County, we have the Grant Marshall Lime Kiln Historic District. Accepting the certificate today is Pam Attardo, Historic Preservation Officer for neighboring Lewis and Clark County. An early pit kiln dating to 1884, a limestone quarry, a staging area, and a later tower kiln built circa 1889 reflect the importance of the lime burning industry to Helena's early growth. Builders in Helena and the surrounding area utilized lime produced at this kiln for projects that included construction of Helena High School from 1890 to 92 and homes in the nearby Lennox subdivision established in 1890. Also in Jefferson County, we have the Jefferson County Highway Historic District. Here to accept the certificate is Michael Carlock of the Montana Department of Transportation. Michael, make it. Well, we'll have to see that gets to him. The Jefferson County Highway Historic District represents the Montana Highway Department's early efforts to provide a modern highway infrastructure. It was one of the first large-scale projects developed by the Montana Highway Department after Montana voters passed a gasoline tax to fund highway projects. Located between Cardwell and Sappington Junction, the 11.8-mile stretch of Old Highway 10 still retains its excellent integrity. And you can take this highway to go to our next property, the Lewis and Clark Caverns Historic District. Here to accept the certificate is Ken Soderberg of the Montana State Parks. This is a property you always thought was listed that wasn't, and now it is. The Lewis and Clark Caverns Historic District is associated with the development of these limestone caverns as a national monument and the creation of Montana's very first state park. Open to visitors during an era of nationwide park development, Lewis and Clark Caverns also reflects the contributions that public works programs, including the Civilian Conservation Corps, made to communities across the country. We have several properties from Lewis and Clark County. The first two properties we will recognize, I want to say initially that they were listed under the thematic study that we discussed, the African American Heritage Places in Helena, MPD. This was made possible with funding to the Preservation Office from a National Park Service underrepresented community grant program, as well as additional support from our friends at the Montana History Foundation. This award-winning multiple property document and its two National Register forms were written for SHPO by Delia Hagen of Hagen Historical Consulting in Missoula, who unfortunately couldn't make it here to Helena today. The first two Helena properties to be listed under this MPD that I would like to call up today are first the Crump Howard House in Helena. Here to accept the certificate is Roxanne Lincoln and her husband Kenneth Phillips, owners of the property, and I believe is Nava with you? Okay. Nava Connor, a descendant, may make it later. A shout out to Roxanne, who used to work at SHPO. Built in 1889 by two of Montana's earliest and most prominent African American residents, James and Clarissa Powell Crump, this Queen Anne-style residence became home to three generations of Crump descendants. Associated with the family for over 100 years, the home's history reflects both the heyday of Helena's African American community in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, and the community's decline but endurance after 1910. The second Helena African American historical property to recognize today is the Dorsey Grocery and Residence, and I'm asking Kate Hampton of the SHPO office to accept the certificate on behalf of the owner who couldn't be here. Constructed in 1904 and closed in 1932, the Dorsey Grocery and Residence, right there on 8th Avenue, was owned by one of Helena's earliest 20th century American African families, that of Walter and Elmira Dorsey. And it remained in the family for several generations. As the most visible and substantial Black-owned business in Helena, the store also functioned as a focal point of the local Black community and was an exemplar of African American achievement. We'll move on to three other properties in Lewis and Clark County that were listed in the National Register, not associated with African American history. The first is the Gearing Ranch on Lincoln Road, west of Helena. Here to accept the certificate is Bill Gearing, owner. "22 log, stone, and frame buildings trace the Gearing's ranch growth over 4 generations. The earliest log buildings date to the 1870s, when Bartholomew and Jane Gearing developed their mixed farming operation along the Helena-Fort Benton Road. Their son David mechanized and expanded the farm, particularly the hog and dairy operations, and grandson Jack added bison to the mix. Today, great-grandson Bill continues the family operation under a conservation easement with the Prickly Pear Land Trust. Also from Helena is the Montana Aeronautics Commission Operations Historic District. Is there anyone here from MDT to accept their certificate? Raise their hand. Anybody want? John Boughton, National Register Coordinator. Thank you, John. The Helena architectural firm of Ostheimer and Campo designed both the modernist office building, constructed in 1958 and expanded in 1965, as well as the adjacent modernist garage, also built in 1965. The first and only structures to house the Commission's operations, the district reflects the maturing of Montana's aeronautical and aviation industries after World War II. Finally, from Helena, we have the Western Clay Manufacturing Company additional documentation. Accepting the certificate is Stephen Young Lee, Resident Director of the Archie Bray. All right, we like stand-ins. All right, could you introduce yourself? Thank you, Brad. First listed in 1985, the Western Clay Manufacturing Company is now being recognized not only for its local significance as an important historical brick manufacturer, but also for its national significance in the development of the field of ceramic arts. Founded in 1951, the Archie Bray Foundation Pottery Works has served as an incubator for young artists exploring clay as a medium and is widely recognized throughout the nation today as the birthplace of modern studio ceramics. We have anybody from Park County here today to accept the certificate for the Livingston Memorial Hospital? All right, why don't I read this one? Pete Brown, Historic Architecture Specialist. Way to stand in. A local example of mid-century modern architecture, which Pete loves, the Livingston Memorial Hospital opens its doors to patients on February 28, 1955, serving the community for the next 60 years. The hospital represents the first significant community investment in healthcare infrastructure and the impact of the landmark Federal Hill-Burton Act of 1946, which transformed American health care system after World War II. Today, the building is being repurposed to become affordable senior housing to continue to serve Livingston well. Looking north to Phillips County, we have Lookout Cave. Accepting the certificate is again Zane Fulbright, on furlough for the Bureau of Land Management. Located in the Little Rocky Mountains, Lookout Cave contains the largest known assemblage of pictographs in the north central Montana, as well as projectile points and normally perishable items made of wood, feather, shell, and sinew. The quantity and the quality of the preserved art and artifacts makes this site of tremendous value for better understanding and better appreciating the early cultures of the Northern Plains. From Butte Silver Bowl, we have Schaffers Chapel African American Methodist Episcopal Church. Here to accept the certificate is Cher Justo, Executive Director of the Montana Preservation Alliance and co-author of the nomination. First listed in the National Register as a contributing building within the Butte-Anaconda National Historic Landmark District, Schaffers Chapel AME Church is now being recognized individually for its important association with African American history. The building is the only remaining church in Butte that once hosted an all-black congregation and was one of the only public centers of the African American community there during the 20th century. The story of the AME Church is integral to African American history in Montana and to the early history of civil rights in the United States. From Stillwater County, we have the Charles and Gladys Pelton House. Accepting the certificate on behalf of the owners is Joan Brownelligan, author of the nomination. Successful sheep ranch owners, Charles and Gladys Pelton, included all modern conveniences, electric lights, waterworks, and a fine fireplace in the two-story stone home they had built for themselves south of Fishtail in southeast Montana. Finished in 1928, the house stands as an uncommon and fine interpretation of a cobblestone American four-square house in a rural setting that was constructed by a skilled local craftsman, while also displaying the personal preferences of Gladys and Charles Pelton. From Yellowstone County, we have the Huntley Project Office. Accepting the certificate is Rick Hansen, archaeologist for the Montana Area Office of the Bureau of Reclamation. In 1905, the U.S. Reclamation Service received approval to construct the Huntley Project, a major irrigation project to allow agricultural development of an estimated 35,000 acres east of Billings, Montana. By June 1909, 300 farmers had filed for irrigated land on the project. Built in 1918, after a flood destroyed the original project office, this simple utilitarian office building still serves as the central hub for project management of the Huntley Project. Finally, we have a series of certificates to recognize the L4 lookouts in the Forest Service Northern Region. I'm going to say a few things and then invite folks to come up and get the individual certificates. We end our presentation by recognizing another thematic study that was responsible for the listing of not one, not two, but 8 Montana fire lookouts in western Montana. This study was undertaken by the United States Forest Service Northern Region, also known as Region 1, and was based on an earlier 1984 project to record and obtain determinations of eligibility for lookouts on the Lolo and Bitterroot National Forests. The current multiple property document, which is called L4 Lookouts in the USFS Northern Region 1932 to 1967, focused on a specific lookout property type, the L4 style, and was written and prepared under contract by architectural historian Janine Kaywood of Missoula. Doubling his work and living spaces for seasonal fire spotters, fixed fire lookouts were essentially components in the Forest Service's program to prevent forest fires. In 1928, Forest Service employee Clyde Fix created a standardized lookout plan, the L4, and by 1931, the Forest Service began producing ready-cut kits that even untrained carpenters could assemble on site. Under this multiple property document, 4 Lolo National Forest lookouts were listed in the National Register for Missoula and Sanders counties, and 4 lookouts were listed in the Bitterroot National Forest for Ravalli County. Here to accept the certificates while I read out the names of the individual lookouts are Janine Kaywood, author of CRCS, and Mary Williams, retired Bitterroot National Forest historian and Heritage Program manager who got it all started. The lookouts being listed in Missoula County are the Double Arrow Lookout, the Mineral Peak Lookout, the West Fork Butte Lookout, and in Sanders County, the Cougar Peak Lookout. On the Bitterroot National Forest, we have in Ravalli County, the Boulder Point Lookout, the Gird Point Lookout, Medicine Point Lookout, and St. Mary's Lookout. So thanks to every one of you for the efforts that you've made in telling the history of these properties for the benefit of all Montanans. Please now all join me in a round of applause for all of our National Register certificate awardees.
Thank you, Mark, and I want to join Mark in congratulating those newly listed on the National Register of Historic Places. I think you all are aware of what a rigorous process this is for preparing a nomination and also for the State Historic Preservation Review Board to the time and effort that they take to review these nominations. It's a very, very serious effort, and that makes it a very, very serious award, so we're very proud of all of you. I do want to take just a minute to acknowledge the work of the State Historic Preservation Review Board. The Montana State Preservation Review Board is a 9-member board appointed by the governor. Their duties include the review and approval of National Register documentation, the review of appeals to the National Register nominations, providing written opinion on the significance of the properties, the review of completed state historic preservation plans, and providing general advice and professional recommendation to state agencies and the State Historic Preservation Office on the stewardship of heritage properties. The last 2 years has witnessed the retirement of one of the State Historic Preservation Review Board members, and we'd like to recognize him tonight, Zane Fulbright. Zane? I think you all have met Zane. Zane, will you please come up here? Zane Fulbright of Lewistown served on the State Historic Preservation Review Board from August 2012 to October 2018 in the role of Historic Property Administrator. Zane received his bachelor's degree in history from Whitman College in Walla Walla, Washington, and his master's degree from Montana State University in Bozeman. While he began his professional career with the Forest Service in 1990, Zane moved in 2005 to the Bureau of Land Management, where he now serves as the Heritage Program Lead for the Lewistown Field Office. His role includes management of BLM heritage resources under the National Historic Preservation Act, including budget, partnerships, tribal consultation, data management, and compliance for historic and archaeological sites. Zane's time on the board was instrumental in the submittal of well-documented National Register nominations. Not one to limit himself to just the review of nominations, Zane also authored, co-authored, or found money in the BLM budget to drive several National Register nominations through the review board and onto the National Register listing. Zane also greatly contributed to the biennial board reports on the stewardship of state-owned properties. We hope Zane enjoyed his time on the board as much as he is appreciated by the board for his service, and we want to recognize Zane Fulbright now as a retiring member of the State Historic Preservation Review Board. And now we want to move on to an exciting part of our program. Every 2 years, the Montana Historical Society and the State Historic Preservation Office solicit recommendations from across the state for individual civic groups and projects that are outstanding examples of dedication and perseverance in historic preservation. This year, we are honored to present 5 such awards, and I'd like our State Historic Preservation Officer to come back to the podium to present those awards. Mark?
Thought I'd be smart. Not too smart. Thank you, Bruce. We're very pleased to recognize the following people one by one. Our first award, the 2019 Award for Outstanding Service to Historic Preservation, what is known as the John N. DeHaas Memorial Award, is going to Dr. Mara O'Neill Conrad of Bozeman. Mara, would you please come forward? Mara Conrad is a full professor at Montana State University in the School of Architecture in Bozeman, where she has taught undergraduate and graduate level design classes since 1990. She completed her own education at the University of California, Berkeley, receiving her Master's of Architecture degree in 1985. Since her arrival in Bozeman, Dr. Conrad has consistently demonstrated her commitment to historic preservation in her teaching, documentation, research, and public advocacy. Through her teaching, she instills in her students the importance of understanding historical context, socioeconomic influences, and a community-focused plans that communities have for goals of architecture. This understanding is reinforced by formally documenting historic architecture using Historic American Buildings Survey, also known as HABS, research methods. Using such methods allows one to map the evolution of architecture's role in Montana and opens the doors for students to appreciate the ways in which the West has affected architectural decision-making. To date, Dr. Conrad's HABS documentation, largely vernacular in focus, includes over 100 Gallatin Valley buildings. In addition, HABS submissions by her students for the Charles E. Peterson Prize, a prestigious national award, have resulted in recognition every year that they have been entered. Dr. Conrad has also developed a course at MSU that focuses on the social, cultural, and economic lives of early rural Montanans by researching the families and the businesses that occupied the buildings. This research permits her students to gain a fuller understanding of the relationships between the buildings and those who occupied them. Her public advocacy includes many public presentations, 6 exhibits drawn from her research, numerous publications in regional and national journals. Mara has served as a board member on the Historic Preservation Board of Gallatin County, the City of Bozeman Historic Preservation Advisory Board, and as co-chair of the 2009 Vernacular Architectural Forum in its annual conference when it came to Butte. She currently serves on the editorial board of the 49th Parallel E-Journal, on the board of directors of the Vernacular Architecture Forum, and she is in her 4th term on the Montana Board of Architects and Landscape Architects, which is a governor-appointed position. Dr. O'Neill Conrad epitomizes the characteristics that we associate with the John N. DeHaas Memorial Award. As stated here during the award's establishment in 2013, the John N. DeHaas Memorial Award is to recognize those individuals and organizations whose service and accomplishments go above and beyond and take us further along the historic preservation trail in Montana that John DeHaas began blazing more than 60 years ago. Please join me in thanking Dr. Myra O'Neill Conrad with this presentation of the 2019 Montana Award for Outstanding Service to Historic Preservation. Our second Preservation Award for Outstanding Contribution to Historic Preservation is awarded to Randy Hafer of Billings. Randy, would you please come forward? Randy's architectural education began at Stanford, where he earned his Bachelor of Arts in Architecture. He followed this up with a Master's of Architecture degree from Yale. After acquiring his degrees, Randy found himself next in Chicago for the first 11 years of his early professional career. However, in 1992, Montana-born Randy returned to his hometown of Billings to continue his passion for architecture. 7 years later, in 1999, Randy founded High Plains Architects in Billings. Randy realized that many historic buildings can be adapted to new uses while still retaining their historic character and fiber that the building has and which makes it significant. Randy's early interest in historic preservation is illustrated by one of High Plains Architects' first projects, the renovation of a 1918 downtown warehouse at 1 South Broadway, historically known as the Armor Cold Storage Building. After the renovation, Randy liked it so much he moved the office into the building until 2001. Continuing to live the mission, Randy renovated the 1893 Kloss building directly across the street and relocated the offices of High Plains there in 2008. In addition to the preservation of historic and National Register listed buildings, Randy also pursues LEED, or Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design, certifications for many projects. To date, he counts 12 LEED Platinum buildings and 8 certified historic tax credit projects to his credit. Randy and High Plains Architects meld a unique blend of historic preservation and green building practices, following historic preservation guidelines that include the Secretary of the Interior standards for the treatment of historic properties. Randy originally focused his efforts on projects in and around Billings, but he has expanded his sphere to include redevelopment projects and feasibility studies in numerous communities, big and small, around Montana. His latest project is the revitalization of the National Register listed historic Billings hardware building on Montana Avenue in Billings. The plans include a renovation that will yield a main floor and basement retail space with 2 stories consisting of 1 and 2 bedroom apartments. Randy serves on many local and state boards and commissions, including the Downtown Billing Partnership Board, the Billings Improvement District Board. His enthusiasm is obvious as he has traveled the state and country speaking on the issues of historic preservation, sustainability, and redevelopment. Randy's high standards serve as a model for public and private historic preservation projects. He is highly respected, professional, and a source of tremendous preservation knowledge which he is happy and is eager to share. Please join me in thanking Randy Hafer with the 2019 Montana Historic Preservation Award. Our third award for outstanding achievement in historic preservation goes to Christy Hager of Missoula. Christy, would you give me a call? Christy, the owner of Lightroom Photography, is a professional in all respects of the word. She received her Bachelor of Arts from the University of Pennsylvania, her Master of Arts from the University of Delaware, and her Master of Fine Arts from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Her background includes work as a draftsperson and assistant professor and instructor with stops in Wisconsin, Florida, California, as well as Montana. While Christy's passion for photography and the fine arts and documentary forms has always played a central role in her life, she is best known in historic preservation circles for her large format and digital photography of cultural resources. For over 25 years, Christy has been the person to call for photo documentation of historic sites by innumerable cultural resource firms and government agencies. Her ability and her work ethic to capture the subject in the best possible light has garnered her a well-deserved reputation and this recognition. Often using a large format 4x4 view camera, much of Christy's work includes HABs and historic engineering records recording, also known as HABs hair documentation. Christy's attention to detail and ability to convey the nuances of the property she documents has resulted in the Library of Congress archiving over 500 of her photographs with over 70 HABs hair projects. The love for her work, her medium, and the resource is obvious in every photograph she takes. Christy has served on the Montana Speakers Bureau since 1996, lecturing throughout the Montana on regional photographers and historic preservation photography. Her traveling exhibition of photographs, Montana's Historic Highway Bridges, highlighted the engineering and beauty of these engineering structures. Christy also has her own favorite historical photographers and authored the book Evelyn Cameron, Montana's Frontier Photographer. As succinctly stated in a letter of support our office received for Christy's nomination from well-known, but not here, Montana Highway Department historian John Axline, who said, Christy may not be doing the brick and mortar historic preservation, but she has certainly contributed heavily to the field through her detailed photographs, which document, in many cases, resources that are now gone, but thanks to Christy, will not be forgotten. For all these reasons, we are honored today to recognize Christy Hager with a 2019 Award for Outstanding Achievement. Our fourth award is for Outstanding Historic Preservation Stewardship and will go to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Mountain Prairie region. I regret to announce that among many others in the federal government, the Fish Wildlife Service was instructed not to participate in any events that represent the agency. And they cannot be here today, and I got several calls expressing their regrets. So in honor to them, I'd like to read the speech and recognize their reason for getting the award. The 2019 Award for Historic Preservation Stewardship goes this year to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Mountain Prairie region. In many ways, in recent years, this federal agency has uniquely demonstrated how historic preservation and agency mission can coexist and even thrive together. The National Historic Preservation Act frames how all federal agencies must manage their cultural resources. It establishes the National Register program, mandates stewardship of historic federal property, and outlines consultation between an agency and the State Historic Preservation Office. Nearly all agencies own historic properties. And like most agencies, the U.S. Fish Wildlife Service doesn't have historic preservation as its primary mission. Nonetheless, Fish and Wildlife and a few key staffers have gone beyond fulfilling the Preservation Act's intent. We commend the agency and its people on its good faith consultation with us, its empathy for its historic resources, and for establishing collaboration as a way to accomplish more. Good stewardship is evident both in routine actions as well as those that require special consideration. At the Bozeman Fish Technology Center, for example, the agency was faced with replacing lead paint coated cedar cladding on one of its historic residences. After demonstrating that the 100-year-old siding could not withstand paint stripping, Fish and Wildlife committed to a customized in-kind siding replacement in painstaking deference to the hatchery's historic character. And again in 2018 at the Lost Trail Refuge in Flathead County, Fish and Wildlife partnered with the Montana Preservation Alliance and the National Park Service to host a week-long window workshop that successfully repaired and preserved, rather than replaced, the failed windows at the refuge's Jackson Homestead House. Employing arcane techniques for repairs that will outlast us all, the workshop also trained staff from 6 other different agencies and organizations who will now put to work elsewhere what they learned at the Lost Trail. Special recognition should go to agency archaeologist Allison Parrish of Bozeman, who has done much to bring a strong preservation ethic to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife projects here in Montana. Her attention to detail and her consideration of alternatives has consistently resulted in better preservation outcomes. SHPO and all Montanans who value historic places and unspoiled natural settings appreciate Fish and Wildlife's good work in historic preservation that goes beyond their primary mission. We look forward to their continued support for the preservation of Montana's significant historic, archaeological, and traditional cultural places. Our final award tonight is the Montana Governor's Award, and I'm going to ask Lieutenant Governor if he would please do the honors presenting.
Thanks very much, Mark. And I tell you, I love this ceremony and this great celebration of all the great work that's being done around the state. But the 2019 Governor's Award for Outstanding Historic Preservation Rehabilitation Project goes to the McGraw Building of Fort Benton, owned by Bob Milford. John McGraw built his namesake building as a saloon in 1912. He chose a visible location opposite the Missouri River Bridge on Fort Benton's main thoroughfare, Front Street, to entice prospective customers. The Irish-born McGraw made his living as a saloon operator for much of his time in Fort Benton. He weathered Prohibition by selling soft drinks and meals to customers and allegedly selling Canadian beer to undercover police. Through the years, the McGraw Building changed hands. Its businesses came and went. It operated from the early 1930s to the mid-1960s as the Capitol Theater. An addition on the rear of the building allowed seating for 274 moviegoers. Subsequent businesses housed by the McGraw Building included an optometrist, insurance company, and a roofing company. In time, owners significantly altered the brick and terracotta facade of the structure, removing the original storefront and infilling the arched opening that distinguished the building. Enter Bob Milford. Raised in New Mexico, Bob moved to Montana in 2006, pursuing his interest in historic preservation almost immediately. Bob served 6 years on the Great Falls Cascade County Historic Preservation Commission, donated time as a site steward at the First Peoples Buffalo Jump, and currently serves on the board of directors of the Sun River Valley Historical Society. In 2015, Bob purchased the McGraw Building in Fort Benton. Realizing the historic gem that lay beneath, he went to work removing the non-historic brick overlay and movie theater awning. With a new historical compatible storefront, the McGraw Building's historic and aesthetic charm is once again on full display. What has become a fairly nondescript building, now a hallmark of the block. During the rehabilitation, Bob relied on the expertise of a number of people, including Sophia Spark of Spark Architecture, Randall Reeves of Reeves Construction, and Ben Ruddy of Dutton State Bank. Fort Benton's layered history goes back to Montana's earliest days as a territory through to the homestead boom. Restored buildings like the McGraw shows those layers and established a setting for this important historic narrative. We know that preservation doesn't happen as a matter of fact. It takes something extra from the people who make it happen. So we thank Bob Milford for his hard work and ability to see beyond a languishing storefront. His vision and work show us all what's possible. Congratulations, Bob.
Well, congratulations, Bob, and to all of the folks who received certificates, listings, and awards tonight. We want to express our appreciation for the work that you do. It's tremendously important. It's very, very hard work. Takes a lot of effort and passion, and we admire all of you for that. I'd like to thank Lieutenant Governor Cooney for being a friend and being a part of this ceremony every 2 years. And State Historic Preservation Officer Mark Baumer, thank you for your work, and your team at the SHPO office. And I'm sure this has sparked some curiosity on your part about some of these great Montana stories told through historic preservation. So I would invite you to visit the Montana Historical Society website, click on Historic Preservation, and you'll find all of this material, including the nominations, listings, and just a wealth of information about historic preservation. Thank you all for being here tonight, this afternoon. We have some great refreshments out in the lobby. We invite you to stick around and tell some more stories and have a little bit of fellowship together. Thank you very much for being here. We'll see you in 2 years.